Go ahead and get ready for our offering this evening, and let's go ahead and pray now. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much. Lord, I thank you for just the blessing of the testimony of Liberty Baptist Church there in inner city Philly. And Lord, I'm thankful that you are in the business of changing lives, whether that is in the inner city or whether that's in Bellevue. Lord, you're the same God. You have the same power, and you desire the same things. I'm so grateful for that, Lord. I pray that you'd be with us tonight. Bless the offering, and be for your glory and honor. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. And now would be the time in the service where we sing another song.
Let's all stand. It's Jeff's fault. Oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When through the woods and forest glades I wander and hear the birds sing sweetly in the trees, when I look down from lofty mountain grandeur and the brook and feel the gentle breeze, then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. And when I think that God his Son not sparing sent him to die, I scarce can take it in. sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart. Then I shall bow in humble adoration and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Great singing. You may be seated.
Amen. All right, we will go ahead and dismiss the teens out in the front. Brother Nick.
All right, turn in your Bibles once again to the book of Judges. And this week we'll end up the end of chapter 16. So Judges 16, we'll start in verse 23. I've really enjoyed studying the book of Judges. It's been a challenge. It's hard when there's so much negativity in the book to pull a whole lot of good aspects out of it, but this has been a real big challenge, and it's weird to me that it's sermon number 34. 34 sermons into the book of Judges. This is crazy. So tonight we'll just start in Judges chapter 16, and we'll be starting in verse 23. So Judges 16, verse 23, and it says, Then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon their god, and to rejoice, for they said, Our God hath delivered Samson our enemy into our hand. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, Our God hath delivered into our hands our enemy, and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. And it came to pass, when their hearts were merry, that they said, Call for Samson, that he may make us sport. And they called for Samson out of the prison house, and he made them sport, and they set him between the pillars. And Samson said unto the lad that held him by the hand, Suffer me, that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house standeth, that I may lean upon them. Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there, and there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Samson made sport. And Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars upon which the house stood, and on which it was borne up, of the one with his right hand, and of the other with his left. And Samson said, Let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords, and upon all the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which he slew in his life. Then his brethren and all the house of his father came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the burying place of Manoah his father, and he judged Israel 20 years. So let's pray and then we'll get into it tonight. Dear Lord, I just thank you for the day we've had, Lord. I've had a full day, Lord, and I'm just thankful to you for time with your people, Lord, and just time in your word and just fellowship today and discussions and everything today, Lord, has been awesome. So, Lord, I just pray that one more time tonight that you'd be with us as we get into your scripture, Lord, and help us. Lord, just help me to remove any distractions, even in my mind, that would distract me from preaching the way you'd ought to have me preach, Lord. And I just pray that you'd be with us, help us to focus on your word tonight, Lord, and just help me to only say what you'd have me to say, Lord. And I just pray that you'd be with us tonight and help us. In Jesus' name, amen. So at this point in the story, we're reaching the climax and really the end of Samson's part in the book of Judges. And we've been through the beginning where we saw the miracle that was the birth of Samson and everything that has gone into that, and the angel coming to his mother and father and saying, you're going to bear a son, this is going to be a miracle, he's going to have great strength, and he's going to be a Nazirite. And then as the story progresses, Samson continually throughout his life disobeys the Nazirite vows, and he goes to vineyards, which he shouldn't even touch the fruit of the vine, it says, in his Nazirite vow. He goes to all these different places, comes in contact with dead corpses over and over and over again. And then we get to last week where he finally reveals the last part of his Nazirite vow, in that if he gets shaven, he will lose all his strength and be as any other man. And Delilah deceives him, and now we're at the part of the story where Samson is blinded. They capture him and they put out his two eyes, and he's just consistently day by day by day grinding grain in the Philistine prison. So as we come into this, that's where we're at in the story. Is Samson is just a prisoner, a slave. He's blinded, and he's just day by day by day grinding grain and wheat for the Philistines, and just really at a low point in his life. So we get to verse 23, and it says, Then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon their god. So Dagon was literally known as the god of grain, the god of wheat. And so it's ironic, and it almost plays a little bit into the story of Samson, that he who was supposed to be a servant for the only living God is now grinding grain for the god of grain. It's literally the way that they try and pull it out in this passage. And so he was known as the god of grain. And interestingly enough, studies and commentators show that originally Dagon wasn't the god of the Philistines. The Philistines served other gods or served no gods at all. And when they moved into the land, they began to serve Dagon. And so this god was much like the Israelites. Once they moved into the land, they started to adopt the practices and the gods of the land that they moved into. So now as they capture Samson, this capture that has taken place of them capturing Samson has brought shame upon Yahweh God, the God of the Israelites, the one and only God. This one capture of Samson has, in the Philistines' mind, lifted up their god Dagon and said, look what our God has done. Look at the strength of our God, as opposed to this God of the Israelites who has done nothing for them. He's delivered their champion into our hands, so our God is better. And so they're gathering together to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, and it says, and to rejoice, for they said, our God hath delivered Samson our enemy into our hand. Now the first thing to point out and to show, this was nothing that Dagon did, because all Dagon was a piece of wood or a statue. It was nothing. It was lifeless. This is nothing that Dagon did. This is just the fact that Samson's sins and the stuff that he's done in his life have brought him to this point to where now Samson's attitude has brought him to a point to where he has disgraced God, and by his actions has lifted up this false, fake, dead God. And so the Philistines are rejoicing, saying, look at the power of our great God. Look at how powerful our God is to deliver such a beast of a man into our hands. Look how powerful our God is. So in verse 25, they bring Samson out to entertain everyone. So in verse 24, it says, and when the people saw him, Samson, they praised their God. For they said, our God hath delivered into our hands our enemy and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. Literally, they're saying, our God Dagon has given us this man who is the destroyer of our country, who's our enemy. Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands that slew many of us. And so in verse 25 it says, when their hearts were merry, or basically when they were drunk, when they were fully in the swing of partying in this passage, they sent forth to bring out Samson to humiliate him. That's literally the whole purpose of what they were going to do here. Is they said, bring forth, bring him forth, call for Samson, that he may make a sport. That's just so we can make fun of him, so we can ridicule, so we can have a good time making fun of him. I mean, you can imagine the sight at this point. Samson's blind. They drag him out with what they say later on in the passage here was a little boy is leading this mighty man out to the Philistines. And I mean, you can just imagine the sight as Samson, totally helpless, he's blind, he can't see where he's going, is being led out by a child, and the jests and the fun that they're making of it, saying like, this mighty man who once destroyed half of our economy in grain and vineyards and all that stuff is now just led about by a little boy. He's brought down to nothing as he stumbles. Maybe they're laughing at him. But it says that that they called for him that he may make a sport. And they called for him out of the prison house, and he made them sport. And they set him between the pillars. So the pillars in the temple, they said a lot of times what they would do is they would have these support pillars that were really like, on top of it would be a giant platform, and that would serve as the rest of the support for the whole building. It's these two pillars. So they put him by the pillars. There's no real evidence as to why they put him specifically by the two support pillars. It seems like a dumb move knowing how strong that Samson was before this point. But regardless of whether or not they thought he was strong, they were under the impression that he was completely and totally harmless at this point. So they put him in between the two middle pillars of the building. So now we see that this man, called from before birth to bring God's people close to him, has now become a trophy to the Philistines. And that's what they're doing. They're parading him out to say, look what we've done. Look at the trophy that we have given. Now the Philistines are making a fool of Samson, saying, look how weak your God is and how strong our God is to give you into our hands. So before we continue and get any farther, I want us to put ourselves in the Israelite shoes. Or more importantly, let's get our mindset in the fact that think about what this means here. And I want us to get a little bit aggravated and even mad at this point, because this is literally, for an Israelite, for a true-blooded Israelite right here, these Philistines are worshiping a God that does nothing. It's a piece of wood. And yet at this point, the God-given deliverer of the Israelites is being shamed, and therefore, because he's being shamed, he's got God's name on him. He is God's deliverer. And so in this act of what the Philistines are doing, they're saying, your God is stupid. Your God is pathetic. He's weak. He does nothing. And yet in reality, all their God is a piece of wood. And so to get us into the mindset for the rest of the thing, and really in all honesty, to gather what the author is trying to get across here, we got to get mad at this, because this is not just some people making fun of any person. This is someone making fun of our God. This is a group of people saying about our God that we love and that we serve with our lives. They're saying, your God is stupid. Your God is foolish. You are fools to follow him because look how weak he is. When in reality, that has... I just want us to get mad at this, because it really is infuriating that because of Samson's actions in his life, he has brought shame upon God, who is the only all-powerful being in the universe, and raised up something that's a piece of wood. It's absurd. It's blasphemous. These blasphemous heathens are claiming that their pathetic carved God with no life, no voice, and no power at all is better than the one and only God that I love. I want you to put that in your mind. That I love, that I serve. It's infuriating that Samson, through his actions, would allow them to be able to say this about our God. It's infuriating. So Samson, as he gets to verse 26, he asks the boy that led him in there to lean him upon the pillars. So one of the strongest men, arguably in history, by all evidence in the Bible, one of the strongest men in history, is led out into the Philistine to be made fun of by the Philistines by a little boy. And so he says to the little boy, show me where the pillars are, because no doubt the boy leads him out into the middle of the arena, and the fact that there's a roof on it, as we see in the next couple verses, there's a giant hole in the middle of the complex so that they can look down to where Samson is at and make fun of him, possibly throw things at him and yell at him and curse at him and things like that. And no doubt the little boy leads him out and then just kind of leaves him to wander around because he's blind. He's got no way of feeling about where he's at. And so he asks the boy, he says, lead me to one of the pillars so that I can prop myself up. So he tells him to prop him up on the pillars, and he leans on both of the pillars. And so then we get a little bit of an idea of who all is there. What type of crowd is there to make fun of Samson? So it says in verse 27, now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And there were upon the roof, this is just the roof, it's not talking about the rest of the complex. There were on the roof about 3,000 men and women. This wasn't just soldiers, though there were soldiers there. This was men and women on the roof, about 3,000. And then it's believed that in the lower levels, up until where Samson was, there was a multitude of other types of people. The lords of the Philistines were there. There would have been soldiers there. There would have been people of stature. There would have been, in all honesty, people from all walks of life. You could see people, all sorts of Philistines were there with one intent. They were there to make fun of Samson. All of them. That's their only reason for being there. The whole reason for gathering together was to make fun of Samson. So we have tons of people, no doubt, throwing things at Samson and laughing as he stumbles around, and he's leaning here on the pillars. And this is where, once again, we see the only other instance where Samson prays out to God. So in verse 28, it says, and Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged for the Philistines for my two eyes. So we're going to go through his prayer step by step, much like we did the last one. But we see here that one last time Samson calls out to God. He starts off by saying, O Lord God. And this reference in him saying, O Lord God, is literally him saying, Yahweh. He's identifying that this is Yahweh God, the God of the Israelites. He's saying, O Lord God, remember me. So when you look at the verbs in the way that he's structuring his prayer, he says, remember me, strengthen me, this once, O God, that I can be avenged for my eyes. He's very, very self-centered still, and even in his last moments where he's crying out to the Lord, he's only doing this to be avenged because they plucked out his eyes. It's not out of some obligation and saying, wow, look what I could do for my country in sacrificing myself to kill all these Philistines. No, he just wants to kill the Philistines, get revenge on the Philistines for his eyes. That's the whole structure of this. No matter how you break it down, it's all personal, like bringing the attention to him. Lord, avenge me. And when he says there, strengthen me this once, O God, the O God there is generic. It's the same word that the Philistines used for their god Dagon. When they said, our God Dagon hath delivered us into their hands, it's generic. It's a god. It could mean any number of gods. It's a generic reference. So he goes from saying, Lord God Yahweh, strengthen me, and then when he calls out again, he gives it a more generic, wider berth and says, O God, that I can be avenged for my eyes. And so his whole intent here is only revenge. And we see this, we saw it throughout his whole life. Every time he'd get them, they'd get him back. He'd get them, they'd get him back. And it goes back and forth and back and forth. And his only intent here is to get revenge for his eyes. So we see in verses 29 and 30 that Samson commits suicide and takes all the Philistines in the building with him. So I want you to imagine this as they're all mocking him and mocking our God, and they're cursing him and talking about how great Dagon, this piece of wood, is. They're cursing at him, they're throwing. Samson just starts to bolster himself up. And the way that they said it is, I don't know how large Samson was. I don't know how far apart the pillars are. We just know that he wraps his arms around both pillars, and he's standing there with both arms wrapped around his pillars, no eyes. He's just got his arms around him, wrapped around him. And he begins to squeeze, and his last words that we have recorded are right here in verse 30. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Now, the significance of this is interesting because if you'll recall a little while ago, when he called out to God the last time, he said, "Lord, I'm thirsty. I need help. I need to be refreshed. I need water lest I die by the hands of the uncircumcised Philistines." It was absolutely absurd for him to die with the Philistines before. And yet now at the last bit of his life, he says, "Let me die with the Philistines." He's okay to die with the Philistines. That's what the author's trying to get out by showing that part of Samson. And so he grabs the two pillars, the one with his right hand and the other with his left. And he says, "Let me die with the Philistines." And it says, and he bowed himself with all his might. So the idea of that is he just hunched up and he pushed as hard as he could, flexing everything that he had. With everything that he had, he pushed down the pillars. And it says in verse 30, at the end of the verse 30, "And the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which he slew in his life." Now the saddest part of this story, I think, is this verse right here, because one of the commentators says, look, I know it's a brutal way to say this, but it's literally saying from the text that in his death, he was worth more in his service to God than when he was alive. And he said, I know that's a harsh way of saying it, but literally that's what the text is saying, that in his death, he did more for God than he ever did in his entire life. In all the instances where he fought the Philistines, he never did more than he did in his death. He was worth more to God in his death than he was in his entire life. So then at the end here, it just simply states, "Then his brethren and all the house of his father came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the burying place of Manoah his father, and he judged Israel 20 years. So now we get that conclusion of his judgeship, the official conclusion of his judgeship, and saying that he judged Israel 20 years. We don't have, other than what we have in Scripture, we don't have any evidence that he led Israel in a great way. We don't have any evidence of what he did before he started going after the woman at Timnath. He could have possibly done some stuff, but the author's got a different intent here. And so as we bring it around to how this applies to us, there's still application just like there was last week. And it was hard for me this week because as I was studying through the passage, I was like, man, it literally looks the same exact as it did last week, that your sins, as you go through your life, your sins could end up destroying you. And there is application for that. There's the fact that his whole life, all he did was please himself, and now here at the end, in his death, he does more for God than he did in his entire life living. And the culmination of his sins and his problems was his death. First, it was the literal plucking out of his eyes and him having to be a servant to the Philistines who were oppressors over him. And now it literally culminates with his actual death. But the author had a different intent. And when I found this and when I saw this, it really hit me hard in what exactly the author's intent was with Samson's life. He had a different intent to the whole Samson story. So when you look at the whole Samson story as abroad, we'd all agree that Samson was supposed to show the Israelites that they were separated from God. He's showing us in this point that their judge has finally become just like they are. Their judge is typifying what they are doing to God. So God and the author's intent in writing this, and inspired by God to write this, is he begins to show the Israelites in the life of Samson that even though they're being wicked, and even though they're serving these other gods, and even though they're doing, just like Samson, absolutely whatever they want, God still wants to bring them back to him. And so I'm gonna prove that a little bit here. So he wants to show the Israelites that God was still working to bring them in. Through this story, though this story of Samson is tragic and hard to read, it's actually full of a lot of hope. And there's only one reason for that. So the intent of this whole end of this passage, and really the whole story of Samson, was to show that even though you've been wicked, and even though you've played the harlot, and even though you've done absolutely whatever you want, and for the rest of Judges we'll see that they're doing whatever they want, even though you are completely and totally against me, your God, just like Samson was, I still want to use you. I still want you to call on me, and I will still answer you. Because what is amazing about this passage is that in his final dying breath, even though he wants it for himself, God still answered a fallen Samson. That's the biggest idea that the author wants to bring out. Even though Samson was wicked and did whatever he wanted his whole life, the grace and mercy of God listened to his final request, and he still said, Samson, I'm going to do it. Even though Samson was wicked. Think about it. No matter what the author wants us to get out of this, is no matter how down you get, no matter how far away from God you get, he's still waiting for you to call on him. He still wants to use you, even if you're doing it for your own selfish reasons. God still wants us to call on him. No matter how down you get in your life, God is not done with you, and he will hear you when you call out. He wanted to show Israel, and he wanted to show us that even though they were cast down, even though they were not in a good relationship, he did not cast them off. He did not discard them to the side. He didn't say, you're now worthless to me, and I don't want anything to do with you anymore. He was using Samson to say, wake up! This is time for you to get things right with me, so you don't have to destroy your lives like Samson did. So you don't have to get your eyes plucked out. So you don't have to be a bondservant to these Philistines. He says, I want you to wake up. I want you to call on me again. I want you to call out to me, and I will still answer you, even though in Judges 17:6 it says, in those days there was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. That's the theme of the book of Judges. There was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. And God is using Samson as a way to say, wake up. I want you to look at Samson's life and say, man, that's hard. That's upsetting. Samson, who is supposed to be an example to the surrounding nations that God is an almighty and all-powerful God, has brought God to a position where it says, where the Philistines say to them, your God is pathetic. Your God is weak. Much like Israel was supposed to be an example to all the surrounding nations, that they would say to the surrounding nations, their God is powerful. Their God is awesome. Their God is mighty. He's given them this land, and yet, through Israel's life and through Samson's life, they make a mockery of the God that they're supposed to be serving. And so what God has for us and what God has for Israel is the amazing fact that even though we may live, just like Samson, even though we may live our whole lives not doing right and doing what is selfish in us, God will always be waiting for us to come back to him. That's the awesome truth we get out of this passage. And this is the flicker of hope. And I was under the impression as I was reading through this, okay, the rest of this is going to be negatives. The rest of this is going to be a bunch of horrible stories, and it really honestly is a lot of horrible stories. But the awesome truth that we get from this is that Israel was given a ray of hope in that when Samson was at his lowest point in his life, he called out to God, and God still answered. Even though his request was selfish, God still answered Samson's request. And in this one act, even though he was doing whatever he wanted, Samson began to deliver Israel out of the hands of the Philistines. He did exactly what God had intended for his life in this one last instance. Regardless of not if he was doing it for his own selfish desires, in this instance, God used him in a way that began to deliver Israel from the Philistines. The lords of the Philistines were there. They no longer, after Samson collapses the thing, they no longer have a government. They'd have to, after this point, scramble to get together a new government and a new military leaders and things like that. And so in his last act, even though it was selfish, God still used him in a way that began to deliver the Philistines, the Israelites, out of the hands of the Philistines. So for us tonight, even though this is a hard passage and it's hard to understand why God would answer us even when we're at our worst. But if you've ever been at a point in your life where you've literally felt like there was nothing you could ever do to get right with God again, the amazing truth that we have here is that even if we're at that point, God still wants us to call out to him. And he still wants to use us. And he still wants to answer our prayers to him. So tonight, it's just a very simple application, is that if you feel like you're cast down, if you feel like you're at a position in your life, and I don't know anybody's heart, but I know from personal experience that when I was at a place where I was down and out, I felt like I couldn't get out of it. And I felt like I didn't have a right to call out to God. And I felt like there wasn't any way, because of the position that I was in, I felt like I wasn't able to, like God wouldn't hear my cry if I did. And a lot of times that's just the devil wanting to keep us down. So if you're in that position, if you're in a cycle in your life where either you're constantly looking for your own thing and you think, man, I could never call out to God. That's such a false idea. That's such a false thought process, because regardless of how low you are, the proof is right here. Regardless of how low we get in our lives, we can always call out to God, and he will answer us. And he wants us to call out to him. And so tonight, with heads bowed and eyes closed, I just want to challenge you that if you're struggling, I know there's been many times in my life where I've struggled, and if you're struggling tonight and you're struggling with sin, you're not too far that you can't turn back to God. Samson's story is hard, and it's a shame that Samson got to this point, and yet at the same time, there's so much hope for Israel, there's so much hope for us, in that even when we're at our lowest point in our lives, we can still call out to God, and he will still hear us. And so, dear Lord, as we come to you tonight, I just pray that you'd be with us and you'd help us to realize that there's never a point where we're too far to turn back to you. And Lord, I just pray that you'd help us to enact this every day in our lives, Lord. I just pray that you'd help us, Lord, and I just as we pray tonight, that you just speak to our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen. I'll give you a moment to respond.
think about, I can't help but think about how applicable the song that Tati's playing is to this message. Great is thy faithfulness. God's so faithful to us, even when we're wicked, even when we're doing everything that we want. And so it's just awesome. You know, if you could just start back over at the chorus, and if just to finish tonight, maybe we'll just sing the chorus of Great is Thy Faithfulness real quick. So just give us a little, and we'll do that real quick. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness, morning by morning new mercies I see. All I have needed thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Dear Lord, as we pray tonight, I just thank you so much for how faithful you are to us. Lord, I just for my own life, Lord, I'm never faithful to you, and yet you're still always, always faithful to me, Lord, and I just thank you for that truth and for the truth we got out of your word tonight, Lord, and I just thank you for all you do for us, Lord, and I just pray that you'd keep us all safe as we travel and fellowship tonight, Lord, and I just pray that you'd be with us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, you are dismissed.